Hello, friends. Welcome to Experience Data Talk, a show featuring data science leaders and technologists from around the world. My name is Mike Delgado, and this is episode 113. And today we get a chance to talk with Angela Lillis. Angela serves as the Insights Lead at Marks & Spencer, and prior to that, she worked in marketing analytics for the BBC. Angela just received an awesome award. She was named one of the 20 Women in Data Technology by the Women in Data UK organization. In this episode, she talks with us about how data and gut instincts can work together and ways to make decisions when you don't have enough data. We also talk about the art of data science and how to tell better stories. She talks about self-awareness and knowing your self-worth, what to do when you're feeling stuck in your career or not sure what you should do next. At the end of the show, I ask her a little bit about how to deal with rejection, especially when you're sharing an insight or a theory about the data and your business leader or your team doesn't necessarily agree with you. She talks with us how to handle that rejection and what to do next. We talk about this and a whole bunch more. Here's our conversation with Angela. Angela, welcome to the Data Talk podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
So you were just awarded the 20 and 20 by the Women in Data UK organization. And I would love to know what that's like and then how did all this happen?
Yeah, well, so it all started almost a year ago now. Nominations are open for the next year already. It's a couple of people in my team approached me because they'd received the email saying that nominations were open and they just really wanted to give it a go. And when I think we should put you forward. And so I was like, well, let me find out what I'm signing up to first. But then it was, there was a whole application process and they just so long writing it and really taking a lot of care over it. They're two amazing people in the team. And then a few months passed and Women in Data gave me a phone call going kind of, congratulations, we'd love to have you as part of the 20. And I don't think it properly sank in for a few more months, kind of quite what they're trying to achieve and quite how ambitious they were being, because it's so amazing. We had the flagship conference in November where it all got announced, and even just speaking to 1,200 so energetic women and talking to them about kind of why I'm here and what we want to do. And then over the last few months, we've started to build activity and momentum, and being a part of that has just been, I keep using the word bonkers, but basically just so surreal, and being able to actually use this platform to talk about all the different things that would have been important to me to hear, how many years ago, months ago, that actually, there are so many people coming up, particularly as our kind of data science, data community keeps growing and going down all sorts of angles that no one would have even predicted 20 years ago, actually helping people think about how they can navigate that. It's just been an amazing one. So, there was recently a billboard campaign across the UK with a few of us really trying to say, girls need real role models out there, which to see your face in lights is not really why I got into data. So it was definitely a bit of a curveball, but it's been a really interesting one to be involved with, and I'd highly encourage anyone to get involved in a general kind of data community as it was, because I think just finding out more and more people's experiences and actually learning from other people, taking a little bit from one person and a little bit from another, I feel like I've learned so much. And then on top of that, being able to give it back to a community just feels amazing.
Well, what an honor it is to not only be recognized by this amazing group of women who are passionate about data science and recognizing people who are really making a difference. And what's also cool is that you were nominated by others, that people saw this in you and were like, Angela, we want you to be recognized. And I know for you, you're like, that's probably a very humbling, like, you're like, well, I don't want to be recognized, but they're like, no, you need to be recognized. What were some of the things that they said to you? Why was it so important that these women were recognizing you for this award?
I think there's a couple of things that I think. Firstly, so I work at Marks and Spencer here in the UK, and whilst we do have probably better than industry average balance between men and women. It's not 50-50, and it's not where it should be. And I think there's part of that I know that I have spent a fair chunk of my career in male dominated rooms, and actually being able to acknowledge that there are challenges that come with that. It's just kind of naturally how things have evolved. It just makes it that little bit trickier. So acknowledging that, but then I think one of the main things that I've wanted to do, particularly as I've moved into managing teams as well as kind of getting stuck into the data myself, is around making sure that everyone is getting the confidence and everyone is getting the support they need to be able to do what they want to do. I think it's very easy, certainly a few years ago, it was very easy for everyone to be forced into the same box around, right, you are a data analyst, therefore you must tick this box, this box, this box, this box. And I think it's slowly but surely becoming clear that actually you could have 2 or 3 out of the 4, but you may just have this side like curveball of a 5th element to you that will bring in a different point of view and a different perspective. It's not just such a linear line that in order to progress you need to become more technical or you need to start managing people. There are all sorts of routes and avenues you can go down, and I think that's one of the things that I've always wanted to try and challenge people, particularly once I've started managing, and even just peers as well, around, do you actually want to be going down that route? I know that route that as you look up in your organization, that's who you are looking up to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that should be the career path you need to go down. Particularly as our data world keeps growing and just so many roles end up turning up that weren't here 5-10 years ago. Your next role might not even exist at the moment, and so actually encouraging people to take the bits they like and the bits they don't and try and carve that.
I think that's a really awesome perspective that you have, because I think especially when we're younger, like we look up to certain people as our role models. We see them in certain positions or titles or roles, and we say like, I want to be like that.
Absolutely.
But you're right. Where technology is moving so quickly, things are changing so rapidly that, the roles 10 years from now, 15 years from now, may not exist.
No.
And you're right, like having that perspective of like that role can still be there, but maybe there's something else that you would be better equipped for or find more passion in.
Yeah, no, completely. Because I think in a very literal sense, my role that I have now didn't exist before I took it 2 years ago. And then even in a more general sense, I think it has certainly, the team that I've worked in over the last 6 years has evolved, and the emphasis has moved away from when I first joined about 6 years ago. It was all about which coding languages have you got, which statistical techniques do you know. But actually, there is more and more of a realization, particularly here, but I think generally across the industry, that you can be as technical as you like, you can build the best models, you could be so amazing from a data science perspective, but if you can't tell anyone about it, there's very little point in being able to do it. So actually finding that blend of skills, and actually finding the role that manages to tick each box how you want it to. In terms of actually how much time you want to be spending developing those kind of harder skills versus the softer skills. There are more and more roles opening where you don't even need to necessarily have a maths or stats degree or any kind of formal qualification. And it's kind of, well, actually, for people who just kind of liked numbers at school, as it were, but didn't necessarily pursue it, that doesn't mean that that's a door that's completely shut to you now, because there's a whole spectrum of roles that now kind of open up.
That is so true. We did a data talk a couple weeks ago with a program manager at Microsoft. His name was Ted Way, and he talked about exactly what you're saying, that after actually he got his PhD in machine learning, and then when he entered the workforce, he found that he actually liked stepping away from the computer and actually interacting with leaders, with the engineers, with the customers of the products, being curious, asking the questions, right? It's like that, those EQ skills, those soft skills that are so important.
Completely.
Now having the math and the sciences is super important too, because that's how he could then communicate to the data scientists and to the leaders. But like you said, like those soft skills, being able to tell those stories is crucial.
Oh, completely. And I think I've almost surprised myself over the last few years, because I have become much more focused on my time, and actually where my passion lies is around that communication area of it. I do still enjoy getting my hands dirty, as it were, every now and again. But I think now for me, it's like, actually, what can we do? How can we get it out there? And the kind of so what and the recommendations of it. I think particularly, working. So I work on the fashion side of Marks and Spencer, and so fashion is an emotive subject. Particularly people buying clothing because it flatters them and actually it boosts their confidence and those sort of things. It's the sort of things that you won't directly see out of the data. It's not a clear-cut thing. It is the inference you need to make, and it's a step further that you need to make to translate the data back into human terms. I think that's one of the main things for me working in a customer insight role, where it's so easy to just think the numbers and it's another row in a database, but actually these are humans interacting with the brand, and they're doing it because they want to. And so being able to communicate that is so massively important to then make a leap into actually, well, what do we want to do off the back of it?
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that's fascinating, like how you're moving from the data that you're analyzing, recognizing that there are certain assumptions and biases in place.
Yes.
And then you're trying to then draw out the qualitative aspect of, this is fashion, like this is what is helping to build confidence. And those are sometimes things that we don't have numbers for.
And I think that is where sometimes it is a bit of a tricky area, and it is a little bit of a grey area, and certainly something I feel like is a main, I suppose, development point for me over the last couple of years, is really trying to understand a bit more about how to properly make those leaps. Because obviously you don't want to jump too far, as it were, and start making inferences out of very little. But I do think there's definitely a place for using your own experience to be able to do something. And I think that's that's the main thing I think that I've been trying to do more and more. You obviously, need to be a little bit cautious because of sample of one and all of those sorts of things. But being able to actually think, well, so the data's saying that people have done this, this, and this. Does that make sense? Would you do it as a consumer? Yes, like you say, we are slightly biased in terms of demographics and those sorts of things, but actually, does it even make sense on a human level? Would someone really interact with a brand like that? And actually, why would they do that? And I think just starting to think and stretch things that little bit further and start to actually think of that emotional thing, it is a leap, and it's certainly something I think I've been trying to do more and more, but it's always going to be a bit of a struggle. And I think that is the area I think that is quite a big stretch. And certainly for a lot of people like me, whose background is in some of the STEM subjects, and but being able to formulate an argument with some knowledge and being able to take that further and extrapolate that into some recommendations. Sometimes you have to be a bit big and bold, and sometimes you have to make that leap. But as long as it makes sense to you and it makes sense to the rest of the teams and actually drives a recommendation which you can test, these are the sorts of things that really we need to start translating it back into human terms.
What advice do you have for those who are looking at data sets and they're doing what you're saying, like they're trying to recognize where bias might exist, trying to be aware of those things. They're trying to be aware of any sort of assumptions that they're making. But you're right, like it's also important to kind of ask yourself like your own gut check question, like, does this make sense? Would I want to do this? Being aware of all the other assumptions and biases. What are some advice you would have for those who are in that process right now and they're having trouble kind of getting clarity around these insights?
Firstly is to be aware of your biases. Like there's, at the end of the day, you can't represent everyone at the same time. So actually being aware of where you feel like you stand in the kind of scheme of things. And then actually, well, in an ideal world, if there are any of those you can kind of quantify, as it were, to actually know that, well, actually, because I am, younger than the average customer, that means that I have probably got less disposable income, but more time, or whatever that may mean. And actually almost acknowledging from a qualitative view as to where those biases are, but actually then trying to form a view from a quantitative, if possible, where you are having to make some of those leaps and where you are making those inferences. And I think being aware of what are universal truths as opposed to very personal ones. There's common sense, and then there's personal common sense, I suppose. And actually, most of it is an awareness, and I think it is. And I think you've got, even just stretching your viewpoint to the people that sat around you in the office or kind of friends and family, it's still, yes, there is still a bubble and there is still a bias there, but at least you're starting to expand and actually see, hang on a minute, I see why you're different to me in terms of where you've come from and that different angle. I think it's just checking in and making yourself as aware as possible. We're always going to have to make some leaps, but I think trying to embed as many of them as you can in data and being aware of the others is really as much as we can do.
Yeah, you're getting at something that is like the really tough part of data science, and that's the art that you're getting at. It's that. It's the recognizing assumptions and biases and being self-aware of those things, looking at the data sets, talking with others, getting more discussion going around what am I not seeing here, and then also the art is the storytelling aspect, which is crucial. And I'm kind of curious about how you go from taking the data, doing all the insights, and coming up with what you think the data is telling you, and then being able to tell that story to others. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I think it partly helps that I'm a little bit, I've always been a little bit tuned into that side as well. So I did a maths and statistics and politics degree. I was the only one doing it, as you can see.
Brilliant.
But it basically meant that, sometimes I was doing quite heavy, statistical modeling and those sorts of things, but then I'd skip across campus and be arguing about left-wing politics or whatever it is. And so I think, that side of it really helped me to develop my argument skills, and actually knowing the difference between, yes, you don't necessarily have a gap in your knowledge, but you have, with the facts that you have been presented, here is everything. And I think particularly doing that, one of the key things was not just argument forming, but actually the debate of it as well. And that is something that I really try to encourage my teams to do, and just talk it through a bit more. I think there's a lot of, and it is slowly but surely changing, but I think particularly a few years ago, there is a kind of, you are as good as your job as the amount of numbers you produce. And I don't think that's necessarily true. We can all just churn out numbers all day and not actually drive that much, but actually spending the time stopping, calling it quits on actually running more numbers and actually going, right, let's get a few of us in a room and just talk it through. Because even just a sense check with peers, at least it is something. You're talking to someone else and actually just going, am I going mad? Am I going completely down the wrong angle or not? But actually just talking it through, because half the time, even when you feel it coming out of your mouth, you know that it's weird and actually it doesn't stand what you thought was your test in your head. So even just getting it out there and talking to people, I know that it's not necessarily your traditional analyst way of doing things, and I think particularly a few years ago, I was a lot more introverted than I am now, but I think it's getting out there, and even just particularly, we've tried to build quite strong relationships across the business. And so being able to just grab someone for 5 minutes and just go, if I told you that this was true, does it make sense? What am I missing? Of just that, everyone has so many skills themselves, and actually particularly when you've been here for a while, you suddenly have all these numbers in your head that you don't even realize you have in the back of your head. It's only when someone says the opposite to you that they suddenly start igniting. So I think it's just around, talking to people, making sure that your argument's standing up, and actually, whether or not someone thinks it makes sense as well, talking, basically.
That's really, really good advice. Just taking someone aside and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Does this make sense to you? Like, that's like a good check.
Yeah.
To test your own theories.
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't need to be a formal hour-long presentation. It's just a 5-minute thing that, hey, if I told you black was white, do you agree?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about how it is when you are coming up with a theory from the data. You have an insight, and it's something that you are pretty confident about. Like, you have analyzed this, you've checked this against even the team, and you feel very confident about this, and then you present it and to the group, and the feedback is like, Angela, no, this is not. You're totally off here. How do you handle those types of that rejection?
So I think the main thing, I mean, obviously I'd love to say, I just absolutely I never get that. I don't know what you're talking about, but I do think there are certain things where, particularly because you are coming from polar opposite angles, it can mean that you suddenly get through. But I think it is around I think it's fully understanding that other half of the debate. I think if someone genuinely believes that it is the complete opposite to what you've said, then it's a conversation. And I think it's kind of what from your viewpoint am I missing? Because I think particularly when you start doing analytics in the real world, for want of a better phrase, there are so many inputs to a decision beyond the numbers. In an ideal world, in my ideal analyst world, the numbers would end up driving everything. But reality means that that's not true. You just can't possibly do that. And so I think it's finding out what is missing and almost trying to come together for a bit of a mutual point of view. And it doesn't always, it doesn't always work. And actually, depending on situations, decisions will still get made, which do end up being quite different to what the analytics will necessarily say. But I think part of the thing as well I've realized over the last few years is actually knowing where you should really push analytics forward and where you should really make sure that numbers are at the backbone of it, and where it is okay to take a step back from that. I'm going to use the word battle, but basically pick your battles. Because I think, if it is that you have, you are just at loggerheads, and for whatever reason, you've both got quite opposing views, but they both stand it, then it's kind of, we can't answer. It would be amazing if we could answer every question with numbers, but we can't. And so I think it's just finding that balance of, with so much going on and so many questions you could be answering, it's like there's no point to people going for loggerheads for months. This is a fast moving business where you need to actually get that reality in. And so I think it is try and find that mutual ground, but with an acknowledgement that, this is reality and sometimes it's not there.
Can you maybe share an example of a time or a case study that you know about where a decision needed to be made and there just wasn't enough data to move forward on what would be the right-ish decision?
Yeah. There are some times where you can't test it. At the end of the day, it's either we don't have a precedent to be able to model off of the back of, or sometimes it just comes down to time and the sheer scale of what's going on. And I think it is a lot of what I end up doing. I keep talking my job now, but basically there's a lot of recycling in terms of, okay, I can't directly tell you whether or not that number is, whether or not to do that decision. But I can tell you the 6 or 7 other vaguely related things that we've done have had a positive result. And so actually, it's the inference thing of actually sometimes you just need to take the bold leap. You need to be able to actually go, well, do you know what? We can't necessarily tell you that store layout will actually give you exactly what you need. But actually, the little bits that we're seeing mean that we are going in a positive direction. And that's when all the other elements need to start coming in as well. It's, yes, we can't wholeheartedly totally answer through data, but if for some reason the gut feel of everyone there is that it should be done, and it ticks the business strategy that we're going for, sometimes you've just got to take that leap of faith. I think that's some of the balance as well, particularly because my team is I've got 4 people in my team, and we serve across the whole of the clothing and home side of the business. So we're talking about women's wear, we've got menswear, lingerie, kids, home beauty, and 600 stores and an online presence. And so we can't be there for every decision to be made. And so from that point of view, it's kind of, well, what can we provide you that you can do? And if not, then actually, even just a general sense check running past that kind of, a bit of a human sense check, I suppose.
Well, I love the way you handle it. And I think that's what's really cool is that part of your academic background is that political science training and learning how to analyze issues from different perspectives, seeing both sides, being able to debate. And I'm wondering maybe if you can share some advice for the young data scientists, young people who are just getting into working with data and are beginning to need to learn how to debate, how to persuade, and also when to back down.
I think probably the first thing, which I probably learned the hard way, but basically the numbers can't tell you everything. I think particularly once you go into the real world, you suddenly realize quite how much is going on when you've got, M&S has 80,000 employees. And so you're kind of, there are so many things going on at any one time. That means that, yes, the data may be speaking strongly to you, but actually there are other elements of something that you won't necessarily know, particularly early on in your career, I suppose. So I think there is around that. And I think it's the main thing I've learned and the main thing I've got better at is just being confident as well. I think when you're putting an argument forward, know your stuff. I think you can't underestimate being able to walk in and actually go, here are 10 reasons why you should do this. I have considered the 10 that says you shouldn't, and actually here's the reason why they are wrong. Consider the fact that not everyone's coming in from your point of view, not everyone's seeing the same data as you. And so actually, have that debate with someone and actually go, well, who would actually think slightly differently? Is there anyone in the room that's coming from a completely different angle? Do I need to have a look at another piece of data to be able to, discuss with them exactly what's going to come from the agenda? I think there's a lot of, like I said earlier, there used to be, and still is to a certain extent, a focus on generating numbers and generating insight, but actually some of it is around working out what you are trying to do, what problem are you trying to solve, and actually where and how are you going to be able to do it. And some of that is around personalizing what you're doing, and out of the box kind of doing the same presentation time and time again. If it didn't work the first time, it's not going to work again. Who is the person in the room that you're talking to? How do they talk? Are they a numbers person? Would are stats really going to get them excited, or actually is it converting it into that human element? Is it a model, or is it a PowerPoint? It's actually, people respond to different things. And so I think it's taking that time to take that step back and actually go, how can I talk to this person?
That's like really solid advice. One of the big questions that I see on LinkedIn a lot is people are wondering, how do I communicate best to the C-suite? How do I talk best to executives? And this is exactly what you're getting at. Like, you need to learn what is actually going to persuade that person, what is meaningful to that person, what's important to that person. And that's really the art of all this.
Yeah, completely. I think it's so easy, particularly when you are excited about doing some of the modeling or something like that. It's so easy to spend 90% of your time there, whereas actually you should be spending kind of maximum half of your time actually generating any numbers. The rest of it should be looking at them and actually thinking about the room that you are walking into. you are walking into a group, into a room of human beings at the end of the day, and they're all going to come in with their kind of biases, with their perspectives, and then with their kind of emotional connections to things as well. We're all emotionally connected to work because we're here enough hours of the day. And so from that point of view, it's kind of, well, actually, how can this really work for both of us? Rather than me just presenting numbers and everyone just kind of being kind of stiff-faced / looking at their phone / yawning, that's not it's not going to benefit anyone, and it's just going to make everyone feel a bit awkward at the end of the day. So with that little bit of work that you can do and a little bit more research to truly find out actually what will get that connection. And I think, well, yeah, and particularly, when I've got an hour to talk to people, I don't want to be presenting for the hour. You want to be able to talk about it. Because like I say, if you're, I could give you an hour's worth of numbers, but if you're not going to engage with them or do anything about it, it was a little bit of a waste of time.
Do you like to send your deck in advance, or do you like to just present it there with them? Or does it depend on the situation?
It depends on the situation. I think there are certain times when I think, particularly if it is heavily numbers based or heavily has quite a heavy statistical methodology, then I would quite like to send it in advance, to at least then they know that something, that there's a lot that's going on. And I think as well, whether or not it is a tricky conversation to have in the room. Because particularly if I've presented to, say, the whole leadership team, you have a lot of angles coming in there, and chances are, if it's a strong story for one person, it won't necessarily always be a strong story for everyone. And so some of it is making sure that everyone has their opportunity to see it beforehand. And yeah, so I think generally I will send a bit of a pre-read to actually just a little bit of a heads up that there is a bit of a curveball or there isn't. But yeah, there's also the reality of whether or not anyone can read it in the politest sense. So I think, well, this is we all get 800 emails, and if I send you a 30-page slide deck and I'm going to present it to you tomorrow, but I think giving people the opportunity to read it and get the awkward conversations out of the room, getting them to directly email you awkward questions about specific niche points as well, because if everyone's got their own separate points of view, they are going to be all coming in with their smaller questions, which would potentially derail a genuine kind of bigger conversation. So generally I would prefer to kind of send it ahead and just make sure that anyone who genuinely passionately feels about it has the opportunity to think about it and ask any of the kind of smaller questions, so they don't curveball a kind of larger room, I suppose.
What you're saying, there's a lot of wisdom there about all this pre-work. Like before that big meeting, you're doing so much pre-work of how do I best share this story, share this data, what would be persuasive to that person, this persuasive argument won't work on this person. It's all that pre-work, thinking through. And then what you're getting at too is all these emails and discussions and hallway conversations around these different ideas, so that before you walk into the room, a lot of those little side things that could have distracted your main point is kind of already dealt with. And that way you have a more successful chance of getting that thing shared across.
Completely. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's it. I think particularly if there is one big message you want to land, and if there's one big message you want to land, you don't want to distract from it. And I think if it's really important, then you want to make sure that it is landed in the right way, and that no one else is thinking about anything else and moving it away. So actually, can we focus on this decision that needs to get made? And so actually we've got this unifying kind of sense of agreement within the room.
Angela, the other part of being a great leader is not only doing amazing work, getting things done within the organization, having that skill set of being able to do the art and the science, which you clearly do, but it's also about raising up, right, that next generation. And I'm kind of curious, can you talk a little bit about your role as a leader in helping to raise up this next group to be successful?
Cool. So I think there's two parts to it. I think for me, the first thing that I've kind of always thought right from the beginning of my career is almost actually every time it's almost taking a little bit from any previous line manager and actually go, well, what did they bring to the table? It's almost the theory of actually collectively, building up from all of the people that have managed you before and actually going, here are the good bits from each of them. And then kind of building on top of that, because there are so many different styles to things, and actually some things work, some things don't. And so actually it's finding all of those things, but then actually being comfortable with them, both for myself and, the people that I'm managing or the people in the wider team, because there are so many elements to it, and there are certain ones which really work for me, but don't necessarily work for everyone else. I think that was one of the big realizations I had, particularly when I first started managing, that, actually people don't always like being managed in the same way. I am self-confessed, not particularly organized. I'm working different things. I'm working on about 8 different things at one time. I get bored if I'm only on one. And, it's simultaneously Thursday and Friday to me. So from that point of view, I look for a manager that can kind of give me that space to be able to trust me that I will get everything done by Friday, even if I'm, doing 8 things at a time. Whereas I know other people get given, 1 or 2 things at a time, and actually, having stricter deadlines and milestone check-in points and all those sort of things. So I think that was one of the kind of biggest learning points for me, was actually just don't assume that everyone's as scattered as you are, basically. And then I think there's also, there was a lot around the tailoring part for the team. And then I think a lot of it for me as well is around the confidence side of things. There's kind of 2 elements of this. Firstly, some of the, particularly women, but it is a little bit of both. But I think there are certain people that I've come across in my career, and I was probably one of them about 8 years ago or so, who don't quite realise what they're worth. Kind of, I'm, Emma, my employer doesn't really owe me anything. I'm kind of just working for them, and it's like, well, actually, no, they need you as much as you need them. And so from that point of view, actually shout about your skills and actually get what you want out of it. What I was saying about, creating the kind of role you want and taking the elements from it, you are in control of your destiny from that point of view. And also, if you don't ask, you don't get. So from that point of view, actually, once you know you're an asset, you're getting positive feedback, push yourself forward, ask that question. The worst that can happen is that you get a no, and and you're back in the same position. So I think some of it for me was around a little bit of that kind of confidence coaching / pushing people into meeting rooms to get them to ask questions. And then also as well, I think it's giving people in my team exposure as well to new experiences and that next level. You can't expect someone to know how to move to that next level or know which direction they even want to grow in unless they've tried it. And, there are safer spaces to be able to do that in than others. There are safer meetings or, more comfortable meetings than others and all of those sort of things. But actually put them in front of people and, put them in front of a supportive group and let them present and let them start to lead on things. But just knowing you're right behind them if anything happens. And it's just that giving people those opportunities to work out what they do want to do and what they don't want to do is just been a really big thing for me, because I think it is really frustrating when you're sat there getting told that you're not ready for a promotion, but actually you've not been given the opportunity to prove yourself. And actually, if you don't know what is expected of you at this new level or anything like that, it's actually, well, even if someone isn't managing someone, can they mentor? Actually pushing people into different opportunities. If this is someone that is amazing and is actually, destined for great things, they will grab that by the horns and they'll really run with it. And so, and at the end of the day, if they run with it and they're amazing at it, it saves me doing it. So double win, really.
Well, I love your approach. Just shows how thoughtful you are with your team, how much care you have for your team, wanting to make sure that they are presented in the best possible light, that you're, putting your team, exposing them at the right time to the right people in a situation that's not going to be maybe high pressure in the beginning. It's kind of the testing ground. So I really admire like your approach to that.
We've all been in those situations where we have been in a role that we've not particularly felt appreciated in, or for whatever reason, it has just felt like we are hitting our head on the ceiling and not really getting anywhere with it. And so if someone is showing skill and you want to keep them around, where is the harm in actually just, letting them stretch that bit further? And, if they take it, then, it's an amazing thing.
Angela, your advice to those who are listening, going, man, I wish Angela was my boss. Maybe they're feeling that stress. They're feeling kind of stuck in their role and not seeing opportunity for growth.
Mm-hmm.
Your advice for them?
So I think the first thing for me was that I have not at any point known what my next step was going to be. I mean, actually, I did a maths and politics degree. I clearly don't know what I was going to do. So I think from that point of view, I think the first thing is establishing what feels stuck. Like I say, it's kind of you quite the easiest thing to do when you're looking for inspiration around what your next step is to look up. But I think it's firstly asking yourself, is that actually the direction you want to go? Do you want to go left and then up? Or, actually, what do you want to do? And I think that then helps you establish what elements are stuck, for want of a better word. You can just start to get a bit more clarity. Because I think I've never known what I'd want to do. But basically, that's partly my indecision. But I think it's partly just wanting to keep as many doors open as possible. And I think it's the main thing I think throughout, and I only realise this now, but basically realising at each stage as you're thinking about, okay, my time in this role is here and I kind of want to move on, is what doors do you want to keep open and which ones are you definitely happy to close? Because ideally, in an ideal world, you keep every single door open for the rest of your life. But to extend a metaphor too far, you do end up at least closing them too, even if they're not completely shut, certain doors, because you have to make choices. You can't do this massive job that involves everything. So I think it's actually at each stage going, right, I enjoy, there's a reason why I took that job in the first place. What was it that I actually enjoyed? What did I enjoy less of? Okay, well, actually, is there a role that boosts that and removes the other element? And then basically, once you've realised more and more, you start to get a bit of a broader picture. So I started off at the BBC, where I originally was in research. The weren't quite enough numbers for me, so I moved into marketing analytics within the BBC. And then there weren't enough numbers for me, so I moved into retail, and that's where I've been at Marks and Spencer. And so from that point of view, I've known through, that was me knowing that I want to get more technical. And so that was my tick box. I was looking for something that was looking for more coding languages and more exposure to statistical techniques each time. And now I've got to the point that, okay, well, now I want more exposure to stakeholders and decision making and all of those sorts of things. And so then it's kind of finding those roles throughout and moving it through. So I think it's just actually taking stock and going, well, actually, what do I want from this? And then finding those elements, because it's a lot easier. There's all sorts of roles, and just 2 seconds on LinkedIn trying to find any job. Firstly, what words are you going to type in? Because every single company's got a different word for everything. But also, like, actually, what skill sets you want to get out of it. You can then start to hone it down a bit more, and you can start to talk to people about it a bit more. You can realise, well, actually, is it a course that I'm missing? Or if it's a confidence thing, are there communities out there that I can use? Or is there anyone in my network that I can really harness for that skill as opposed to another one? Or do they know someone that's in that industry who they could introduce me? I think it's just actually pinpointing it, because there are so many roles, particularly in data, and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing, and you're going to get more and more lost unless you know what you want as opposed to what the industry wants. What do you want from this?
Angela, that question, what do you want? What do you do? Like it sounds like such a simple question, but it's like one of the most difficult questions you could possibly ask. But it's one of those questions that all of us, right, need to be thinking about, no matter where we are in our career. Like that's the question. That's the most important question that we need to be asking ourselves regularly, be thinking hard about what is it I'm currently doing? What am I passionate about? And it's really cool to hear kind of your career progression as you kind of gravitated towards, I want to do more with numbers. I want to do more with numbers. And now it's like, I want to do more with numbers and I want to tell the stories, and just seeing how that kind of passion that kind of led you through these various roles to where you are now. And you're still like asking like, what do I want to do? how am I? But also like you kind of find through that kind of your, at the deepest level, like your calling, like this is what I'm meant to do, right? Tell these stories, help nurture and build up this next group of strong women in data science. Like that's ultimately like, that's such a cool way that you've kind of progressed in your career. And something that I see in you that I'd love for you to talk about is confidence, because that's something that so many of us struggle with. I think especially if you're like wanting to move on into another role, right? Or another company, like you need to have that confidence to be like, yeah, that's where I belong.
Yeah.
For those of us who are struggling with self-confidence, what things do you suggest we can do to help us feel more confident about ourselves?
God, you said I was asking tricky questions. Well, so I think like I think the main thing I have to keep reminding myself about is that I think literally even 18 months ago, if you'd have told me that I was one of the 20 women in data 2019 and I would have talked to 1,200 people and then I would have been chatting to you on a podcast, I just wouldn't have believed you. Like, you know, I just firstly even just getting to here, but then also just realizing that I've managed to speak for 50 minutes nonstop. This is not a thing for me, and being able to talk about what I'm doing, I just wouldn't have had the confidence to do it in the slightest. I think it is a tricky one, and you know, I would be selling all sorts of life coaching books if I had the answer, but it's definitely, I think for me it is. One of the main things I've found is that there's two things that are the ideal things you need. You need, you know, and everyone they have skills and they have passions. And in an ideal world, there is a sweet spot between the two. I think you can have skills and you can be really good at something, but if you can't talk to someone about it, or you can talk about it, but you just sound a bit miserable, then that's you're not going to be able to get up in the morning and do that. Whereas and then conversely, if you're really passionate, but it's just not where your skills lie, that is always going to be a tricky one. And so just finding that sweet spot and actually just acknowledging it for yourself, that actually, hang on a minute, I am all right at that. And it's like, yes, okay, I'm not necessarily the number one at it and I can always get better. Everyone can always get better. But I think it's so easy to just say it and then go, yeah, sure, that's absolutely fine to do. But it is about realizing what you can do and just constantly reminding yourself about that. I think one of the things that has been so amazing particularly over the last few months, is the backing of friends and actually colleagues, and particularly people in my most immediate team, of just how supportive they've been of everything. You know, it's just having those people around you that you can kind of check in with, and actually they will tell you if you're talking stupid, and actually you know, you can do this, of course you can do this. I think that's one of the things for me. There was, I wish I knew some stats, but basically, one of the main reasons why people stay in a job is because they've got a best friend in the company, as it were. And so actually surrounding yourself by positive people and people who are, know exactly what you can do and that sort of thing, it's just an absolute godsend. I think I would, in your kind of darkest days when you don't think you can do this, you need someone there telling you, reminding you of the last time you did it, or the last time you didn't think you could do it and actually you did. And I think there is a lot of your, there's a lot of your confidence that has to come from yourself. But at the same time, you shouldn't put all of the weight on yourself. People are around you to help you move through as well. And, there's reasons you work in teams and all of those sorts of things. It's so that you can get through it together. And whenever your confidence is slightly dropping off, actually there's someone there who can help restore it, as it were.
I think that's a really good summary of how confidence is kind of built up. Like, yes, there's that definite like internal responsibility that needs to be nurtured within yourself, but then also the power that other people can give you. And like Angela, if you are like giving that to your team, you're building them up, you're preparing them for their next role, whatever it is they're going to be doing. Like you're just like feeding into them, like helping them grow. Because to me, like leaders have so much power to be able to like take those that are on their team and just like love them and like help them grow. And like that can give them so much confidence in areas where they didn't think that they were strong. Leaders can point out and go, you know what? I see this in you. And I want to I think you're really good at this. And I want to like give you more opportunities to see you grow in this area. Like that, like what you're saying is so true.
Yeah, completely. It is so, everyone is always going to have a down day, and and also as well, everyone will always keep hitting new challenges and new things they haven't done, and will suddenly get slightly shaky legs off the back of it. And actually just having anyone around to just actually go, yeah, but you've done this before, you're absolutely fine. Or, it's kind of, I think one of the things that kind of goes part and parcel with this, is that but in my team and in the wider team, we spend so much time at work, and we spend so much time working really hard and actually making major decisions and driving, millions and billions of pounds for companies. But actually, you've got to enjoy it as well. You've got to feel to a certain extent safe, but with your foot slightly out there and taking risks. But then you want to feel like you're in a community that you feel comfortable in and you feel confident in. And part of that is just, I'm going to say enjoying yourself, but basically, it's actually feeling positive when you're walking in the room certainly helps you then your confidence to follow, as it were. And so, I may be known as a little bit silly in the office, but basically, I think there is definitely a place for it. And I think, 20 hours here, and so actually, having a bit of a laugh as well means that you just suddenly feel that little bit bigger and bolder, and you're sitting up straight that little bit more. And actually, if muggins like me can do it, anyone else can.
Well, actually, that's one of the things that I love in leaders is people who don't take themselves too seriously. Like, because like, come on, life is hard enough as it is. And
I think particularly for me, I think there's so many times where I have to go and present to the board, or and I do need to come across as relatively serious, and I actually do, and there are big decisions that are being made, or you're having to talk about your team and restructures and whatever it is. There are so many times that you have to be serious that the one time I get to sit at my desk, I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Right, yeah, there's plenty of times where we need to be serious and good reason to be serious, but there's also many times, especially when you're nurturing your team and helping them grow, like they need to see that side of you. That's like you don't take yourself too seriously. Like you're there to support and love them and care for them.
Well, exactly, because I think there are so many moments that, I want someone to be able to come to me and say, I am having a bit of a tricky day. And, actually, I know that I'm supposed to be kind of presenting, but I'm not sure I can do it. And I would much rather someone come to me with a problem than sit at their desk and worry about telling me and, oh, the big boss is coming over. It's kind of, I'd much rather just chat it through, and I can tell you about the last time I messed up. There's so many things like that actually, like you say, it's the human element of it, and it just means that you start to put things in a bit more perspective, because otherwise, if you've just got it sat in your head and you can't talk to anyone, it just means it grows and grows and grows, and then suddenly you just feel like, oh, I can never do that. So actually, you just need to be able to talk to someone and really, just feel comfortable around people, I suppose.
Angela, before we go, I was wondering if you could talk to a young Angela who is just getting out of college
Yep.
about her upcoming career and the many different choices and opportunities and doors that would be open. Advice for a young Angela.
Oh, so
I always ask tough questions, Angela.
Well, aside from haircut and dress, I think there is. I think the main thing for me is don't worry too much. Basically, I was a fresh out of college. I was a 21-year-old filled with anxiety and just kind of, oh, what am I doing now? And particularly when I didn't have an answer, because I don't know what I'm doing. It meant that you're kind of just constantly panicking about that next step. And even when I was starting a role, I'm thinking about, but what's it going to do for me in, the next role after that? And it's actually just enjoy it while you can. You know what I mean? Particularly when you're on the more junior end of things and you've got less responsibility, enjoy it. Just, actually take it in and just don't worry about things, particularly if you're passionate about something and you really have that motivation to do it. It will happen for you. It may not happen in a linear way, and it may not necessarily happen at the perfect moment, because life sometimes gets in the way. But actually just enjoy the here and now, at least for a little bit, and then you can start fighting again. Because I think it's just so easy to just get swept up into that, oh, this person's doing better than me, this person's moved up, and all of that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, but if you're enjoying what you're doing now and you actually still feel like you're growing, you've got everything that you potentially need, then why stress yourself out constantly? You've got so much time to be able to do that. We're going to be working for years and years beyond now. And so actually just take the time to properly enjoy what you're doing. I think particularly for me, when I spent 2 years at the BBC, and I would probably argue I didn't make full use of that. I'm sat in one of the world's biggest broadcasters, and I just have my head down worrying about things, and actually just look up a bit and see what is going on. And actually, there is so much in the here and now, I think, is the kind of main thing I probably would have told myself quite a few times.
That is great advice for all of us. Just enjoying the moment, enjoying the journey, because you're right. It's so easy for us to be comparing ourselves to others, or to have a certain timeline that we have for ourselves on where we think we want to be. I need to have this title by this period if I want to get to this title. And life is, like you said, things happen in life, and also our passions might take us in different directions. The things we thought we wanted when we were younger. And so you're right, embracing those moments, embracing every single day for the things that we're enjoying and learning along the way is so important. It's something that was great advice for no matter where we are in our journey.
Yeah, I think I basically realized that I don't fit a mold. It's kind of whatever those stereotypes that you want from data people, I don't really fit them, and I like chatting too much. So basically, it's kind of, well, actually, where is that path? And it's okay not to be ticking things off at the same time as everyone else. it's okay if you can't do one thing and someone else can, because you've got 3 other things that you can do. And I think it's just really working out what you've got, focus on what you have got as opposed to what you haven't.
Angela, thank you so much for being in our data talk. It's fascinating and lovely chatting with you. I have a notebook full of notes here. I was just jotting things down as you were talking. So for those who would like to follow your journey, what's the best way for them to do that and connect with you?
So I think probably the easiest way at the moment is LinkedIn. So so Angela Lillis on LinkedIn. I think slowly but surely over the next few months, as the kind of Women in Data continues, we'll be doing more and more activity, and then I think for me, I think one of the things that I really want to kind of build off the back of this year is to properly work out what actually this means I can give back kind of from an ongoing basis. So what that looks like, I don't know, because as we've clearly established, I don't know what I'm doing next at any given point. We'll see what comes out.
Awesome. For those listening to the podcast, just go ahead and open up the LinkedIn app right now. Type in Angela Lillis, Lillis. You can follow her, connect with her there. Reach out to her with questions. Angela, thank you so much for sharing your journey and also just awesome insights for those of us who are building our own careers. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Data Talk. We share out new episodes every single week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes as well as YouTube videos by going to the Experian news blog. The URL is just experian.com/datatalk. And as always, we love hearing from our community. So if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter at Experian Data Lab, or you can always reach out to me directly. My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.